The city gates shatter, the thunder of 1,000 horsemen echoes through the walls, but it's the silence that follows that is most terrifying. It's the silence that announces the end of one world and the beginning of a nightmare. This is the Mongol army, the most lethal war machine ever conceived, and its most powerful weapon was not the sword or the bow. It was terror. And that terror had an intimate, visceral, and sexual face. Today, we will delve into the darkest secrets of Genghis Khan's empire. We will go beyond epic battles to immerse ourselves in a calculated policy of systematic rape, where sexual assault was a military tactic, a tool of genocide to break entire peoples through absolute domination of body and spirit. We will discover how the great Khan himself used his daughters as pawns in a game of espionage and power, and how his legacy of sexual conquest is written in the DNA of millions of men today. This is a journey into the shadow of an empire forged with blood, fire, and boundless brutality. If you are ready to confront the rawest history, stay with us. What follows is intense. It wasn't chaos, it was policy. A protocol of subjugation so meticulously applied that it transformed mass rape from an act of uncontrolled looting into a cold, calculated instrument of social engineering and terror. To understand the true nature of Mongol power, we must delve into this uncomfortable and brutal reality, not to sensationalize it, but to comprehend the deep psychology of the empire. After the surrender or fall of a city, a well-defined process unfolded. Genghis Khan's generals, following the Yasa or the Great Khan's legal code, often issued a crucial order: systematic slaughter. But this slaughter was not random. First, the ruling elite, nobles, military officers, and any authority figure who could lead future resistance were eliminated. Then the focus shifted to the artisans. They were separated, counted, and sent eastward to the heart of the empire, where their skills would be used to build more war machines. They were valuable spoils. And the rest of the population. This is where the machinery of sexual terror began. Mongol soldiers, after weeks or months of exhausting campaigns, privations, and strict discipline, received their reward. And that reward was, explicitly, the right to plunder, to take spoils, and to appropriate the women of the vanquished. This was not an improvised rampage. It was institutionalized permission from above. It was the lubricant that kept the loyalty of a huge and diverse army functioning. It promised them wealth and absolute physical dominance over the conquered. Let's imagine the scene not from the broad perspective of history, but from the ground, from the eyes of a person living that hell. The smoke from fires covers the sun. The thick air mixes the smell of burnt wood with the iron of blood. The screams are not just of pain, but of primordial terror. And then they arrive. The horsemen, imperturbable, descending from their horses like demons, emerged from the steppe. They don't see people, they see spoils. They see bodies that represent the materialization of their victory. Sexual violence in this context served multiple strategic functions, macabre in their effectiveness. 1. Terror as deterrence. News traveled. Stories of what happened in a city that resisted spread like wildfire to the next city on the Mongols' list. This was not abstract terror, it was specific, personal, and aimed at the most sacred: family, honor, the women of the community. By instituting rape as a systematic practice, the Mongols not only punished the vanquished, they sent a chilling message to the next in line. Surrender without a fight, and you will suffer taxes and a change of government. Resist, and your women will be ours. Your lineages will be erased, and your world will cease to exist. It was a form of psychological warfare of brutal effectiveness, designed to break the will to fight even before the first arrow was shot. 2. Destruction of social fabric. A society is not defined solely by its rulers or its soldiers. It is defined by its families, its clans, its lineages. By raping women, the Mongols performed an act of domination that went far beyond the individual. They desecrated the honor of the community, sowed the seed of eternal distrust, what child would be born of this act, and destroyed social bonds from their most intimate foundation. A man who could not protect his wife, a violated woman, a defiled community. This was a wound that would never heal, making any dream of cohesive rebellion impossible. Humiliation was an instrument of long-term control. 3. Genocide and forced assimilation. This is perhaps the coldest and most calculated aspect. The Mongols, being numerically inferior to the vast populations they conquered, faced a logistical problem: how to govern so many. Part of the answer lay in forced reproduction. Young and healthy women were often captured and not only raped in the initial act of looting, but taken with the army as it advanced. They became part of the mobile spoils, forced servants and concubines. The children born of these unions, often en route to new conquests, would be raised in Mongol culture, speaking their language, adopting their customs. They were, literally, a new generation of soldiers and servants loyal to the empire, created from the destruction of other peoples. It was a slow genocide, assimilation through rape that ensured population replacement and the loyalty of future generations. The fate of these women was an endless nightmare. Many died during acts of violence or from subsequent privations. Others were distributed among the soldiers as if they were livestock. The luckiest, or those of higher rank, might end up as concubines in the harems of generals or the Khan himself, a life of confinement and sexual servitude, but with a roof and food. Others simply forcibly integrated into Mongol society, their former identities erased forever. It is crucial to understand that this was not impulsive violence in the individual sense. It was violence permitted, encouraged, and systematized by power. It was the price of conquest, the payment for troops, and the tool to ensure long-term dominance. The Mongols did not invent rape in war, but perhaps they were the first to elevate it to a state policy on such a colossal and methodical scale. It was not chaos that terrified, it was the precision with which they applied horror. If the first part of our story was written with fire and blood on the battlefields, the second was inscribed, much more silently and permanently, in the very code of human life, our DNA. The legacy of Genghis Khan's sexual politics and his descendants is not just a historical account. It is a biological reality that affects an extraordinary portion of humanity today. This is where the macro history of the empire meets the micro history of our genes. 2003 marked a before and after in our understanding of this legacy. A team of geneticists led by the University of Oxford conducted a global study on the diversity of the Y chromosome. This chromosome, which is transmitted almost unchanged from father to son, acts as a powerful magnifying glass to trace patrilineal lineages. What they discovered was astonishing and unprecedented. In a vast region stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean, approximately 8% of men shared an almost identical variation of their Y chromosome. At that time, this translated into an astonishing 16 million men. Extrapolated to the current population, this number is estimated to exceed 35 million. The line in the family tree of all these men pointed overwhelmingly to a single common ancestor who lived in Northeast Asia between 800 and 1,000 years ago. The era, the geographical location, and the colossal scale of the phenomenon pointed in only one direction: the Mongol imperial family, and very specifically Genghis Khan himself, or his closest male descendants, such as his sons Batu, Chagatai, Ajadai, and Tolui. How is this unparalleled genetic legacy in human history possible? The answer does not lie in simple, high reproductive success. It lies in the perfect intersection between a brutal policy of conquest and a unique succession strategy. 1. Privileged and absolute access. Genghis Khan was not simply a man with many wives and concubines, he was the absolute sovereign of an expanding empire. Each new conquest meant that the daughters, wives and sisters of defeated kings and nobles were incorporated into his harem as spoils of war and a symbol of submission. His personal harem is estimated to have numbered in the thousands of women. This reproductive access was on an imperial scale, literally. But the phenomenon did not stop with him. 2. The inheritance of a system. Genghis Khan's sons and grandsons inherited not only his territories, but also his model of power. They themselves became great khans and leaders of powerful hordes, repeating the same pattern. Each of them, upon conquering new regions, acquired their own massive harem of women. Thus the Genghis Khan effect multiplied geometrically through his male descendants, who acted as nodes of expansion of the same genetic lineage in different parts of Asia. They were a dynasty of super procreators with unlimited power to do so. 3. Empire stability and safe routes. The Pax Mongolica, the period of relative stability and protection of trade routes under Mongol rule, was a crucial and unnoticed factor for this legacy. Genghis's sons and generals could travel with their enormous harems for thousands of kilometers safely. This allowed their descendants, bearers of the precious Y chromosome, to spread throughout the empire, from Korea to Hungary, establishing local elite lineages that perpetuated the great Khan's blood. 4. Elimination of competition. This is a sinister but vital point. The effectiveness of the genetic legacy was not only due to the Mongols' prolificacy, but also to the systematic elimination of rival lineages. As we saw in the previous part, the selective killings of men from the conquered elites erased millions of other competing Y chromosomes from the map. By physically eliminating the powerful men of subjugated populations, the Mongols not only prevented rebellions, they were in fact clearing the genetic field for their own hereditary line to spread unopposed. It was a form of biological domination. The genetic study offers us cold, numerical, and incontrovertible proof of the scale of Genghis Khan's power. It tells us that the historical narrative of his dominion is not an exaggeration. His true empire was not just the lands he conquered, which fragmented over time, but the genetic footprint he left, which endures today. It is a somber reminder of how historical events, especially the most traumatic and violent, can shape the genetic diversity of our species. This legacy is not a source of pride, but scientific evidence of a policy of extreme power. While conventional history may measure an empire's success in decades or centuries, genetics shows us that the impact of a few figures, through the most brutal mechanisms, can resonate for millennia. Genghis Khan's Y chromosome is perhaps the most enduring and personal monument to his will to power, a monument built not in stone, but in the blood of millions of his unwitting descendants. So far, we have explored the brutality applied to the conquered and the genetic legacy of the conquerors, but there is another, more subtle, yet equally powerful facet of Mongol sexual politics, the calculated use of their own women as instruments of empire. If plunder and rape were the club, the marriage of Mongol princesses was the silk thread that, seemingly delicate, bound and strangled with equal effectiveness. Genghis Khan and his successors not only took women, they also gave them away, transforming their daughters into the most powerful spies and the most valuable hostages in the world. To understand the perverse genius of this strategy, we must abandon our modern view of marriage. In the 13th century, a marital union between two powers was, above all, a geopolitical contract. It sealed alliances, guaranteed truces, and promised loyalty. The Mongols, masters of psychological warfare, took this concept and pushed it to its coldest and most effective extreme. They were not content with loyalty, they demanded total submission. And a Mongol princess in the court of a vassal king was the constant living reminder of that pact of submission. The process began with the defeat of a people or a tribe. After surrender, the vanquished leader was forced to swear allegiance to the great Khan. To seal this oath, he was required to perform an act of maximum symbolic humiliation, sending his preferred daughter or sister to become a concubine or secondary wife of the Khan or one of his sons. It was the materialization of his defeat. His lineage now served the conqueror's lineage, but the masterstroke was the counterpart. Genghis Khan, in a move of twisted audacity, often honored this same vanquished leader by offering one of his own daughters in marriage. At first glance, it was a gesture of incredible generosity and the greatest honor imaginable, to be related to the golden family of the great Khan himself. But in reality, it was the most elegant chain ever forged. Why was this so effective? Let's analyze the layers of this strategy. 1. The high-ranking hostage. The Mongol princess sent to the foreign court was not a mere wife. She was, first and foremost, a blue-blooded hostage. Any act of rebellion or disloyalty by the vassal king would not only mean his own death, but most likely that of his Mongol wife. To offend the great Khan was to offend his own family, a risk few were willing to take. She was a luxury human shield, a constant reminder of the consequences of betrayal. 2. The spy in the marital bed. This is the most sinister and effective aspect. These princesses, raised in the Mongol court with unwavering loyalty to their clan and their father, the Khan, were the eyes and ears of the empire in the heart of the domesticated enemy territory. They were trained to observe, listen, and report. Is the king complaining about high tributes? Is he conspiring with emissaries from other kingdoms? Is his army growing stronger than allowed? The princess, through her personal retinue, which always included loyal Mongol servants, sent regular messages back to Karakorum. It was an intelligence system of brutal effectiveness because the source of information shared a bed with the target. Espionage was conjugal. 3. The agent of influence and succession control. The princess not only spied, she also influenced. Her mission was to ensure that the vassal kingdom's policy always aligned with Mongol interests. She pressured for timely tribute payments, discouraged dangerous alliances, and promoted officials favorable to the empire. But her crucial role came with the king's death. Her objective was to ensure that the next ruler was also loyal to the Mongols, ideally one of her own sons, thereby cementing Mongol influence for generations. This was a long-term strategy of soft power, disguised as marital bliss. The Mongol Empire leaves us with an uncomfortable and crucial lesson about the nature of power. It demonstrated that human progress, understood as cultural exchange, global connection, and innovation, can sometimes be driven by the most regressive and violent forces. It did not arise from enlightenment, but from the efficiency of terror applied on a continental scale. The sexual politics we have dissected are rape as a weapon of war, forced genetic legacy, spy marital diplomacy, was the central axis of this project of domination. It was not a side effect of conquest. It was its essential tool for achieving demoralization, population replacement, and long-term control. And its echo endures today. The tactics of mass sexual violence to terrorize populations and destroy group identities remain a lacerating reality in modern conflicts. By studying the Mongols, we are not studying a historical oddity. We are studying the archetypal manual, the purest and most escalated expression of an instinct for power that tragically is still present in humanity. The empire of Genghis Khan eventually fractured, its khanates dissolved. But its dual legacy remains. On one hand, the memory of a cruelty that redefines the limits of inhumanity. On the other, the foundations of an interconnected world. It forces us to ask an uncomfortable question. Can horror, once institutionalized on a sufficient scale, paradoxically become a catalyst for a new world? The answer is not black or white. It lies in the grey tones of the steppe, where blood and silk are forever intertwined in humanity's memory.